Most incumbents don't lose elections. They get fired. And they get fired because they're doing a bad job. As you talked about, the immigration system and the border issue is the primary issue in America right now. This is an issue upon which Joe Biden gets a grade of F and deserves to be fired.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who is fighting for America, for sovereignty, for the rule of law, against the Biden administration, which is fighting to dissolve our sovereignty and the rule of law. And now, Jimi Hendrix. Hey! The Democrat Party is not on our side, but the propaganda apparatus that they have stood up in the United States of America is beyond anything that their boy Joseph Gergel could have imagined. Yusuf Gergel? Yeah, Gergel. You know Mr. Gergel. Gergel is, he was a propagandist for the Socialist Workers' Party of Adolf Hitler. And from hell, he marvels at what the Democrats have been able to stand up in the United States of America.
Did I hear you correctly say that perhaps he was influenced by Gergel?
Gergel could have been Gergel. Gergel. See, that's what you call him after. I said that, it just occurred to me when I said it yesterday or day before yesterday, and it makes me laugh because it just occurred to me when I said it the first time. As Joseph Gergel is what his name would be if Goebbels got a ride home from Ted Kennedy. See, then he'd be Joseph Gergel. And that is award-winning NBC News journalist and American millionaire, the Reverend Al Sharpton, with his Gergel warning. He's got his Gergel warning. He's the historian in charge. Speaking of Democrats, we're now being told that in New York City the other day, a driver deliberately ran over an NYPD officer out in the street. Wrong-way driver admits intentionally hitting NYPD cop with car. Until these people are punished for assaulting New York City police officers, they're going to continue, the police union president, Patrick Hendry, said. And, Democrats do this sort of thing. The dash cam shows the moment when a guy driving the wrong way on a one-way street intentionally ran over an NYPD officer. And what's the big deal? Democrats do that all the time. They've launched suicide attacks against our police again and again and again. Here in Washington, D.C., on Capitol Hill, murdering a U.S. Capitol police officer, Billy Evans, in a suicide attack. Killing 2 New York City police officers, Ramos and Liu, in a suicide attack. Murdering, I think, 9 police officers in Dallas. You'd think that'd be a big deal that everybody would remember, but it was a one-day story because a black, radical, leftist, anti-cop whipped into an anti-cop frenzy by Obama and the Democrats, but never mind that. And, of course, a mass murder, suicide attack on police in Baton Rouge. Then we had that guy self-immolate at the Supreme Court, but that wasn't anti-police. That's because he's concerned about the weather. Self-immolating like a Buddhist monk on the steps of the Supreme Court because he wants better weather. That's kind of crazy. Al Gore is responsible for that one. But let me get back to the big news of the day, and we continue to be at 888-630-9625. Front page of the Washington Post is below the fold. Senate GOP struggles to preserve border deal. Why aren't the Democrats struggling to preserve the border deal? They're the ones in charge of the Senate. Why isn't the Lizard King, Chuck Schumer, struggling to preserve the border deal? This is a propaganda effort by the Democrat Party typed up by Liz Goodwin and Lee Ann Caldwell at the Washington Post. They are Democrat Party apparatchiks, bootlicks for the left. And wait a minute, Senate GOP struggles to preserve border deal. Why are they struggling to preserve border deal? The Democrats have the majority. The Democrat has the leadership positions. They're not struggling to preserve the border deal? No, because it's all on the Republicans. And the subheadline, Trump pushes to maintain campaign issue, comma, holding up Ukraine aid. No, that's a lie. You're lying, you filthy liars at the Washington Post. Trump isn't pushing to keep it as a campaign issue, and Trump is not holding up the Ukraine deal, whatever that is. And so Liz and Lee type on behalf of the Democrat Party. Senate Republicans struggled. That's Republicans are struggling again. There's Senate GOP struggles in the headline. Then Senate GOP is struggling because it's all their fault that there's no border deal. That is a filthy lie perpetrated by filthy liars who don't bathe very frequently. Senate Republicans struggled to hold together support for a bipartisan border for Ukraine deal. See, that's the Democrat Party's dirty trick here. Oh, yeah, sure, we'll do something to secure the border when we get $60 billion more for Ukraine. How much have we given Ukraine so far? I think $130 billion. You notice that there are no calls for a ceasefire? That the Secretary of State is not at the table in Geneva or at the United Nations or at the World Court, where they're about to lynch Israel today at the phony baloney left-wing controlled European Union World Court, anti-American, anti-Israel. And because South Africa filed a petition with the World Court, the International Criminal Court, they're planning on lynching Jerusalem, Israel today, and blame them for everything that radical Islam does and for fighting back against radical Islam, because civilization is under assault and the left is not on the side of civilization. So back to this. Senate Republicans struggled to hold together support for a bipartisan border for Ukraine deal on Thursday as Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican Kentucky, it's all his fault, privately acknowledged former President Donald Trump, and his opposition to the deal has complicated its future. That's because the deal sucks. The deal provides for 5,000 illegal aliens a day to be waved into the country and given a gift basket, which is, what is that? I did the math. That's 1.8 million a year, illegal aliens plus. And then amnesty, and then no actual border security. But the Democrats want more money to put more people down there to process the illegals as they flow into our country, to change the demographics of America forever, which is the goal of the left, because they want to destroy America. They've been raised, their Ivy League universities, to be hostile to America. So wait a minute, it's Mitch McConnell's fault, and it's the Republicans' fault, and it's Donald Trump's fault because of Donald Trump, who's not in an elected position, and his opposition to the deal? This is just packed full of lies. Liz and Lee, that lead sentence should go down in history as an example of corrupt, awful anti-journalism that is really just political propaganda. They continue. Republicans demanded stringent border policy changes, no kidding, to pass $60 billion in Ukraine aid requested by the White House last year. Now, last year, it is now January 26th. So last year could be a month ago. But never mind that. They want to use the most dramatic language possible. So Republicans demanded stringent border policy changes. Yeah, because our border is being overrun as never before in the history of the country. To pass $60 billion in Ukraine aid. Here's the reality. Let me explain this to you, Liz and Lee. The Democrats have a gun to the head of the American people. The Democrats are doing the bidding and the work of the Mexican drug cartels, who are among the biggest mass murderers on the planet right now. The Biden administration and the Democrats are in the back pocket, it would appear, of the fentanyl traffickers and the child sex traffickers. They don't want to fix the border, but they want to fuel a war in Europe and another $60 billion for Ukraine. And they are the ones holding border security hostage until they get another $60 billion for the war in Ukraine. I think we've given them about $130 billion so far. And again, hundreds of thousands killed in the war. How many killed in the Gaza now? Like 25,000 or something. after the savages mutilated women and children and are raping and torturing people to this day. And the hostages are not on anybody's radar, and certainly not the White House or Joe Biden or the White House press corps or the Pentagon press corps or anybody else. It's on nobody's radar. So Republicans demanded stringent border policy changes. Yeah. No, and they've got it upside down at the Washington Post. To pass $60 billion in Ukraine aid. No, the Democrats are holding our border hostage. They're holding our country hostage and demanding another $60 billion for Ukraine before they will do anything about our border. So $60 billion to protect Ukraine's border and $0 for our border. That's the Democrat Party's position. Gun to the head, hammer pulled back, baby screaming. And the Washington Post spewing propaganda. Yeah, it was requested by the White House. A small group of Senate negotiators are closing in on a deal that Trump has publicly slammed and that some Republicans have argued could hurt Trump's reelection chances. You know, Democrats have argued this could hurt Biden's reelection chances, but that's not in the story, is it? You know, maybe the MS-13 murderer that strangled to death after raping the 20-year-old autistic girl whose mother testified before Congress last week. That might hurt Joe Biden's election chances. How many more MS-13 murderers have you guys waved into the country? Just extraordinary. This is not journalism. The Washington Post, excuse me just a sec. It's right in front of me here. I get it at my front door every day. And yeah, it's Trump and it's the Republicans. Sure. A significant number of Republican senators have begun to speak out against the border security deal before its details have been released. Why have the details not been released? What are you even writing a story about if we don't know what's in the legislation? You for-rent street corner journalists. My Lord. You guys really, I assume that these journalists are wearing fishnet stockings and red sparkly high heels because this is not journalism. Yeah, before the details have been released. Well, wait a minute. Well, why wouldn't Republican senators know what's in the deal? So the Democrats, the Lizard King Schumer and the Democrats keeping secret what's in the deal, but they won't do anything about the border until you give another $60 billion for the war in Ukraine. And just amazing. So this is your Democrat Party. Hey, how about getting hostages released? How about that? There are Americans being held hostage by Hamas. Is that on the front page? It's not in the paper at all. And even as those terrible Republicans, continue to raise alarm bells. You sound alarm bells. You don't raise alarm bells, but that's okay. I don't expect you to be literate at the Washington Post or anything like that. I'm telling you. Your Democrat Party. $75 billion. They say, oh, we've only given $75 billion so far. I don't even believe that. I think the number is bigger than that. But that said, just amazing stuff. And the Washington Post blaming Republicans because they won't just give another $60 billion to Ukraine to continue a war where there are no peace talks going on, no diplomacy going on, hundreds of thousands killed, and you know, the Biden family got millions of dollars from Ukraine, literally millions of dollars from Ukraine, any way you slice it. Just amazing. Yeah, and it's all Mitch McConnell's fault, and it's Donald Trump's fault. The Washington Post is not a newspaper. And I mentioned earlier their lead story in the Washington Post today is Biden to send CIA director to help broker Gaza deal. William Burns, the CIA director, to meet with key parties in the Middle East because Anthony Blinken, our Secretary of State, has completely failed. Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense, is who knows where he is. He's working from home. And now the CIA director is going to have to delegate the American election tampering to someone else at the CIA this time around, I guess. Now that they've gotten into the habit and see that they can meddle in our elections without consequence, you can expect that they will do it again. I've got a lot of corrupt media for you coming up. On the border, they lie about everything. I think you're aware of that, but I'll share today's pack of lies. CNN, MSNBC, the sons and daughters of Democrat members of Congress posing as journalists at major networks. That's coming up. Hey, it's Chris Plant. Excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Visit ChrisPlantCruise.com. I mentioned a little while ago that the corrupt United Nations International Court of Justice, to which the Democrat Party would cede all judicial authority on the planet Earth, part of this one world government stuff where it's a corrupt left-wing, racist United Nations court. And I mentioned a little while ago that South Africa petitioned the International Court of Justice, ironically named, petitioned the United Nations to attack Israel and blame Israel for being attacked by radical Islamic jihadis. And now the court has ruled against Israel, as you might expect. And Al Jazeera is very excited about this development. The International Court of Justice, ironically named ICJ, because everything must be abbreviated, turned into a code. Otherwise, you're not hip, can't hang out with the cool kids, has delivered its ruling on the emergency measures requested by South Africa in its genocide case, accusing Israel of genocide, just like the people at Harvard and Democrats on Capitol Hill, elected Democrats in the House. Israel must take steps to prevent genocide in Gaza. God, these people are idiots. And there's a woman here who's a judge in judge's robes with her hair dyed red. And you can see from a still photo that she's an idiot. The top court for the United Nations on Friday ordered Israel, they have no authority over Israel, to take measure for now until the left really gets a hold of the world, to take measures to prevent and punish direct incitement of genocide in its war in Gaza. What an idiotic court. It should be dissolved. The UN should be dissolved. We should stop giving it any money. We give it, obviously, much more money than anybody else, the United Nations. Although it stopped short of ordering a ceasefire in a case brought forth by South Africa. The state of Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. If I were Netanyahu, I'd have a few choice words for them that couldn't be used on the radio. But that is part and parcel of the left and what they do. Now, so many extraordinary stories today. In Maryland, the Democrats have passed a bill that would force gun owners to get $300,000 in liability insurance in order to carry concealed or to wear a handgun of any kind. So what is this now? We're learning that United Nations relief workers being paid by us to live in Gaza and be do-gooders were actually involved in the massacre on October 7th because the United Nations should be disbanded and the building in New York should be turned into condos. It's going to need balconies, but that's okay. It can be gutted and rebuilt. Let me get back to Maryland for just a second. Maryland bill would force, this is WJLA Channel 7, the ABC station in Washington, D.C., Maryland bill would force gun owners to get $300,000 liability insurance to wear or carry. Now, they were just forced by the courts a couple of years ago to allow concealed carry in Maryland, which they had illegally restricted. And the court said, well, you can't do that because this is the United States of America and we have a Bill of Rights. Maybe you should read it, Democrats, if you can read. And if you can read, you still may not understand it. Seeing that happen again and again. The dateline is Annapolis, WBFF. Maryland House Democrats, naturally, introduced a controversial gun safety bill the news media uses the Democrat-issued language, a gun safety bill. It's not a gun safety bill. And I should say for the record that I have a Maryland concealed carry permit in my wallet right now. The gun safety bill requiring gun owners to forfeit their ability to wear or carry without firearm liability insurance. This is harassment. It's a poll tax. This is making you pay to exercise your rights guaranteed under the Bill of Rights. And it's a shakedown. And these corrupt Democrats probably have family members that will benefit from it. The bill, introduced by Delegate Terry Hill, Democrat from Howard County, legislation would prohibit wear and carry of a gun anywhere in the state unless the individual has obtained a liability insurance policy of at least $300,000. Now listen to how illiterate this is. The proposed Maryland legislation reads, a person may not wear or carry a firearm unless the person has obtained and it is covered by liability insurance issued by an insurer authorized to do business in the state under the insurance article to cover claims for property damage, bodily injury, or death arising from an accident resulting from the person's use or storage of a firearm, or up to $300,000 for damages arising from the same incident, in addition to interest and costs. That is convoluted idiocy. And the first part, maybe it's the journalist that mangled it, but I wouldn't bank on that. Either way, the country's not headed in a good direction. A person may not wear or carry a firearm unless the person has obtained and it covered by liability insurance. Completely illiterate. Astonishingly illiterate. And here's the member of Congress smiling on the floor of the State House here in Maryland, embarrassing Western civilization again, Democrats. Now, as the bill is currently written, local and state law enforcement officers are not exempt from the insurance requirement. So anyway, police officers would have to get their own insurance policies up to $300,000. And then they went and they talked to dim-witted Democrats, of course. They did talk to one Republican, Delegate Ryan Nowrocki, Republican from Baltimore County, questioned the legality of the bill. This bill places an unconstitutional burden on citizens to own a firearm. They don't really care about the Bill of Rights. They're not on our side. Amazing stuff. Your Democrat Party. Most insurance policies in Maryland will not cover what insurers may deem as an intentional or criminal acts. Yeah, what are you going to do about all your 15-year-old carjackers with their guns? Are they going to get in bigger trouble because they haven't gotten their $300,000 in liability insurance for carrying illegally concealed illegal weapons so they can commit illegal acts? Man, I'm telling you, your Democrat Party. Also in Maryland, you have a duty to retreat, which is what the criminals want. So the Democrats give the criminals what they want, but they will fight hammer and nail that the law-abiding citizen. They're anti-law-abiding citizen, and everything they do is pro-crime, which is why we get more crime. And then they tell us, oh no, crime's down. And the economy's never been better. Isn't this great? Yes, sir. Meanwhile, gun advocate Frank Duffy sees this legislation as another attempt to chip away at the state's wear and carry laws. It's another effort by the state to throw an obstacle in front of people trying to get their concealed carry permits, Duffy said. The Supreme Court made a decision that said Maryland and other states could not require a good or substantial reason to get a permit. That is, you had to prove that you were being stalked by a Democrat who wanted to kill you in order to get a. All right, now let's get back to the Democrats and their open border attack on America. Let's. I kind of want to start with Lisa Menendez on MSDNC. Now, this is Lisa Menendez is an MSNBC anchor woman and reporter. She is 40 years old. That's not important. She went to Harvard. Naturally, she did. You know why she went? And it's kind of funny because she's a reporter for NBC News. And on her Wikipedia page, it declares her political party as Democratic. Do reporters now, it would be helpful perhaps to reveal their political affiliation. And she revealed her political affiliation as Democrat. She went to Harvard, naturally, because her father is corrupt Democrat Senator Bob Menendez. Corrupt Senator Bob Menendez is, he's, how many crooked things does he have? He's got the gold bars and the cash in the pockets of his jackets hanging in the closets and the Mercedes-Benz for his wife. And he's under investigation, but that's kind of been swept under the rug, hasn't it? It's not like the Trump trials. Media is not paying any attention to it. It's not going anywhere. But she is naturally, because the whole news media is a circle fest and a hot tub of Democrat Party sexual malfeasance, mostly. And Senator Bob Menendez is her father. So naturally, she was hired by NBC News to be a fake reporter. And she's attacking Governor Greg Abbott because, well, she's pretending she's not a lawyer from Harvard. She just has her AB. It's not a BA, it's an AB from Harvard. And here she is explaining that Governor Abbott is a bad guy for trying to secure our border and lying. I don't believe that in Texas they're actually defying the Supreme Court ruling. They're working within the parameters of the Supreme Court ruling, but they do continue to lay out razor wire.
There's also sort of a subplot here that is emerging out of the state of Texas, a back and forth with the United States Supreme Court. The Texas Tribune reporting the Texas National Guard and state troopers are still rolling out concertina wire and preventing Border Patrol agents from accessing most of Shelby Park, a 47-acre Eagle Pass park that sits on the bank of the Rio Grande, where thousands of migrants have crossed. And this is despite the Supreme Court ruling against Texas Governor Greg Abbott earlier this week.
Well, Joe Biden led the way on ignoring the Supreme Court, but MSDNC was happy about it because the Supreme Court said that the president cannot give $136 billion to pay off student loans, that the Congress would have to approve that. And he said, screw the Congress, screw branches of government. And then he sang Deutschland über alles and marched into a wall and fell over like a 4x4. Joe Biden was told by the Supreme Court that he cannot give billions and billions of dollars to buy votes by paying off the student debt of would-be Democrat voters. And when Democrats tell the Supreme Court to stuff it and just go ahead and do what they want to do anyway, the entirety of the news media is silent or cheerleading. When the governor of Texas, and I have read that he is working within the parameters of the Supreme Court ruling, but Texas leaders refused to give feds access to Shelby Park amid border standoff was news last night. Top Texas officials said they will not comply with a deadline to allow federal border agents to access to a park along the Rio Grande. You know, they just wave people in by the millions because that's what they've been ordered to do. There should be a mutiny at Border Patrol. And if we had a law enforcement agency, a federal law, like the Federal Bureau of Investigation or something, they should be arresting the president. And the president articles of impeachment should have already been introduced by Republicans on Capitol Hill to impeach President Biden for what he is doing to our country with the border, not fulfilling his oath of office, the Constitution, or the law of the United States. The tensions between state and the federal government have led to some calls for the president to take control of the Texas National Guard and then change the official language of the United States to Tagalog. That's the language of the Philippines. But never mind that. The federal government demanded its border agents get access to the park. That is a high crossing area. They demand that they get access by today, Friday. It's a small area on a big border, but a symbol of a dispute between the state and the feds that is ramping up. And again, President Trump says other states, following my lead, my best girl's lead, that other states should be flying or busing National Guard down to Texas to stand with Texas. The state of Texas is adding more razor wire along the border even after a Supreme Court ruling paved the way for the feds to take it down. Well, they didn't say that Texas couldn't put it up. They just said that the feds could take it down. And if the feds can take it down as fast as the state can put it up, then so be it. And let the Democrats proudly parade that around in an election year. Governor Greg Abbott shared on Thursday why he thinks there is constitutional backing for the state to do what he needs. He said, "It was the states that created the United States. And when the states voted to create the United States and have a constitution, included in that agreement was the compact that the federal government would take care of the states." That's right. Now, the Supreme Court ruling allows for the federal agents to cut the razor wire, but there has been no decision yet on the case as a whole, whether they can put up razor wire. Now, let's go to, we've got another Alyssa Menendez, the daughter of Senator Menendez, who is under indictment, but it's being swept under the rug. Alyssa Menendez.
It feels like a step in the continuation of Republicans exploiting concerns about immigration to embrace authoritarianism, right? To say we are going to go it alone. The rules do not apply to us.
She doesn't know what those words mean. She went to Harvard. The Republicans are exploiting the situation and authoritarianism. Sieg Heil, meine Schatzi. So then the federal government should roll tanks into Texas and take over the National Guard and open the border and wave the drug cartels in and the child sex traffickers and the fentanyl traffickers, because that's what the Democrat Party wants. And she is just a dim-witted, Harvard-graduated shill for the left here in the United States. Now let's go to CNN. Let's go to number 18, Poppy Harlow, which we have learned is her porn name. That's her porn name. Poppy was their Boston Terrier when she was a kid, growing up on Harlow Avenue. Very interesting. And now she's an anchor woman at CNN. And she, too, and this is all that CNN, I'm going to play for you the entire CNN coverage of the border crisis today. This is all CNN had to say in their morning show.
Trump is calling on, quote, all willing states to deploy their National Guards to help repel migrants at the border, backing Governor Greg Abbott in his escalating battle with the Biden administration over the border. Abbott is defying a Supreme Court ruling that allows federal border officials to remove razor wire from what Texas placed right there.
What Texas placed right there. That's, there you go. Well said, Poppy Harlow. Back to the Simi Valley with you. Amazing stuff. Now, and that is the entirety in the morning show on CNN today. That is the entirety of their coverage. They didn't get into the fact that 25 governors have signed a letter supporting Greg Abbott. They didn't get into that. They didn't get into the fact that the Democrats want open borders, more crime, more drugs, more drug death, more child sex trafficking. That the Democrats are helping the cartels, the drug traffickers, the child sex traffickers. That's the Democrat Party. You know, they love child sex trafficking in schools and things. This is one of their things, to be sure. And they just didn't get into any of that. Texas has a congressman by the name of Keith Self, who appeared on the Maria Bartiromo program on the Fox Business Channel this morning.
I think the border has now reached the boiling point. That you now see governors getting involved. We have a trucker convoy coming down to the border. The American people are going to have to get involved. I'm delighted to see 25 governors support Governor Abbott. And I think we're going to have to be aware that the president can federalize the National Guard, but it would be much harder if 25 governors sent their National Guard troops to the border to support Texas.
See, my best girl's idea from yesterday morning on the couch is really gaining traction, really becoming popular, I've got to say. I've got more. Carrie Lake, who appeared on the Tim Pool podcast, and 25 states now stand with Texas. The Democrats inflicted the first Civil War upon us. Are they coming back for more? And I've got politics for you as well. A little update on the Gaza war. Mexican military swarms a popular American tourist spot because the crime is so out of control, but it's moving here. How much are we paying for illegal aliens? And Black Lives Matter protesters who rioted and burned will be awarded millions of dollars in Seattle for all the violence they perpetrated. Yeah, I've got Joe Biden for you coming up, who spoke at a beer plant in Wisconsin yesterday. And he's not good at speaking. His brain, she's a no good. She's a no good, that brain of his. I've got that for you coming up because, you know, it's Friday. You got to laugh at the ridiculous people. Tucker Carlson putting the fear of God into Canada, and little Justin Trudeau and his blackface. I've got that coming up for you. Rand Paul, why are we in the United States funding both sides of every war? Senator Rand Paul wants to know. And old John Fetterman, the Uncle Fester of the Senate, he is, it's kind of funny. People are like, how is he, you know, he's taken the red pill. That is, his brain is coming around. I'm not so sure it's true, but we'll see. And we got a little Don Lemon because The View yesterday attacking Nikki Haley. Remember, it was Don Lemon said that Nikki Haley was over the hill, not in her prime, right? Because, like, he'd know anything about it. And also I want to share with you that this is kind of fun. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who's going around kind of doing a non-presidential presidential tour, a listening tour around the country. And in South Carolina, which is an upcoming primary state, Senator Joe Manchin hosting what he's calling Pints and Politics. Pints and Politics. Pints and Politics with U.S. Senator Joe Manchin. Putting out statements. You got to buy tickets. You got to buy tickets. They're all just greedy, money-grubbing people. And they have a scheduled event cleverly called Pints and Politics. You know, we, the Chris Plant Show, we've had politics and a pint for years, for many years now. Politics and a pint, where great Americans come and we hang out and have a couple of beers and tell the truth. Now Joe Manchin's poaching that.